Uh, Today, I think we will be looking on basically on population, and also we'll touch on the sample and also the sample size and also the sampling techniques according to qualitative and quantitative methods. So we'll touch on those aspects. I think most of you are now familiar with me. My name is Welcome Kupega. I am a college facilitator from Ekurhuleni Learning Center. I'm the one who's offering these workshops on research. We are going to focus on another workshop today. I think when I do my counting, should be the 6 workshops since I started this year. So today I will remember that what we are doing when we started with the first workshop, those of you were there, we gave just an overview on how a research proposal could be developed according to various colleges and so on, but specifically to the College of Education. Other colleges, they got their own way of developing research proposal. So we gave an overview, just a summary. Now we are working on each aspect in detail. That's why we break it down now into smaller details so that you give more focus on each detail of the research proposal. And remember that, colleagues, at the same time, those of you who are already on your M stage, you know that your research proposal becomes your chapter 1 and so on. But let's leave it that for another thing. So before we can start, I want us to give the outcomes of today's workshop. The first one, I want us to understand and identify the study population. 2, you should be able to describe the sample. I've included the sample size and also the sample techniques. And be careful, colleagues, all these concepts. For example, if you say the sample size of my study is this and this, you need to justify it by giving a certain literature which backs your sample size. We'll talk about that later. And also the sample techniques in quantitative and both in qualitative methods. So we'll be touching on the same methods. That's why I've just separated it there as outcomes. But basically, we'll look at the sample size, the sample techniques in qual and also in qual. So we'll look at those two, all those methodology. As we normally do, let's see what we covered last week. I think those of you who attended the one for last week, I think last week our focus was more on, I think we were touching on analyzing quantitative data. Yes, we analyze quantitative data, and we look at basically at the SPSS, and we have also an example of a variable which we're working on. We also look on how you can develop a questionnaire where we said there are 2 ways. The first one, you can develop it by putting all the items or the statements at a go, all right, without grouping them. Then the second aspect, you can group them into variable or construct. So we look at those aspects, okay? So, but the example we used last week, it's where we've grouped our statements in a form of constructs of variables. We look at an example of one construct only, all right? Then we spoke about the aspect of to say the construct or the variable, it should align to the statements. In other words, you have statements which you put there, they must talk to your variable or construct. If, for example, 1 or 2 of the statements are not talking or relating to your variables, when you run the test of the SPSS, it's going to show you that statement is loading in another construct. And I think we use an example of reading. And when you look at one of the constructs, I think the last statement there, it's more about talk about strategies and all of this. It's more about reading. It was not about motivation. So I've said when you run your SPSS test, it's going to tell you that this statement on strategies, it loads or it's relevant to the variable of reading. So we spoke about some of those aspects. But the other thing we spoke about, we look at analyzing the data, okay, quantitative data. we look at presenting, how to present it. And we spoke that you can present it in different forms. You can use tables, can use graphs, and so on. And also, we look about interpretation, because we agreed that data is good or numbers are good, but they don't talk for themselves. So you need to give them a meaning. All right, that's interpretation. So the other aspect we spoke about, we touched on to say, for now, we are more focused on descriptive statistics, where we just present the frequencies and the percentage. And maybe you can also look at the aspect of the three averages: your mean, your medium, and your mode. All right. And I think most of us will know the difference between all of these averages. Maybe just to recap a little bit. Remember that the mean is the average you are used to get, you add all the numbers basically, and you divide by the number. All right. Then from there, your medium is the middle value in the list of the numbers. Then from there, you have your mode, which is a value that occurs often. Right. So those are the simple description of these three averages. And the other thing we spoke about, we said in regard to the inferential statistic, like I've indicated to you guys, you are going to be given a more detailed workshop around that, where it's going to be, they are going to take you on how to use SPSS. Like I've said with the other group last time, there was a workshop. If you go to, I think, anyone go to my UNISA, there was a workshop which was organized on atlas.ti. I think there's another one coming this coming weekend again. I mean, this coming week, next week. I don't know when is the date. If you go to my UNISA there, you'll see there's a workshop which is coming next week on atlas.ti. So, guys, if you are available, get to that workshop so that you get another additional information on how to analyze qualitative data there using the atlas.ti. I think the SPSS is still coming. If it's available also, just keep on looking on my UNISA. Okay. I think also we remember that when we talk about these inferential statistics, we also have what you call the factor analysis, whereby the SPSS can assist you with what you call the Kaiser-Meyer-Olkins of sampling, which always measures the sample size. Okay, it checks whether the sample size is enough. For example, in quantitative, you cannot have less sample size. So we'll look at that also, all right, when we talk about sampling today. And also you have the Bartlett test of sphericity, which always tries to check the reliability of the data collection instrument. Okay, how reliable is this data collection instrument of yours? Then you have the Cronbach alpha, which also I think the Cronbach alpha is the one which checks the reliability of your data collection. Then you have what you call the Bartlett test of sphericity, which normally goes and measure the correlation between the variables and so on. So those are some of the differences in these inferential statistics which SPSS can run for you. Please, guys, if you want to understand this better, you just have to go to the workshop where I was talking about quantitative data analysis. I think I've presented those aspects perfectly. Okay. Now, when it comes to the interpretation of data, whether it's qualitative, right, especially quantitative, the first thing what you do when you interpret the data, you first give your own voice. You give your own understanding about a certain statement. All right. Remember what we did last week? We're looking at the statement of motivation. And when I interpret it, I even put different colors there. The first part, it's where I gave my own understanding as a researcher in regards to this statement of motivation, which was more about checking if students agree or disagree, to say they have a better understanding on how they are going to use their studies after graduation and so on. So I give my own understanding to say, if students have a better understanding, how are they going to use their results or their qualification after they graduated? Maybe it also contributes to their self-esteem and all of those things. Okay, that's my understanding. Then after, you back your voice or your understanding with the empirical evidence or the participant responses. What did the participants say? All right. How many of them agreed? How many of them disagreed? How many of them were neutral? Then from there, you link that and you give a support from the literature. That's how we interpret qualitative data. It works better in that way. So if you approach it in that way, your interpretation, it should be the same throughout the document. All right. So you should not change and now decide to first give the empirical evidence. Then from there, you give your voice. Then from there, you give the literature. It should be the same sequence throughout. Okay. You can also factor that also when you do your qualitative data interpretation. All right. But remember that your data interpretation in qualitative, you don't give the participant responses according to the Likert scale. You give them according to their verbatim presentation. All right. Their voice, their verbatim. How did they say they respond to this question? Verbatim. You don't change anything. But we spoke about on how to do interpretation last time in qualitative data analysis. Okay, let's quickly look at today's session. Quickly start now. I think all of us will understand what is population. Okay, yes, my sources are a bit old, but at the end of the day, you can get the latest sources which describe what population is all about. All right. I like some of this description for now, especially the one from Bless and Hickson Smith. It says a population is defined, right, as the entire set of objects or people which is the focus of the research and about which the researcher wants to determine some characteristics. In other words, the population encompasses all the people or the participant in that type of a study. Right? It's more broad. It's more broad, the population. But Frankel and Wallin also describe a population as the group of people the researcher will use to generalize the results of the study. In other words, at the end of your study, you are going to generalize your results based on this population. Remember that when we generalize in research, we are saying this outcome, it could also be relevant to the other part of the population which you didn't touch on. We generalize, okay? Because I can't go out and do a study for the entire population of the country, for example. No, but I can take a certain population from certain area of the country and generalize my outcome. Okay, it's been allowed in research. And also, the treehorse.com states that a research population is generally a large collection or object or collection of individuals or objects. That is the main focus. Remember that always your population is your main focus. So you look at your research questions, you look at your problem statement, you look at also your research title and say, I'm going to collect my data from this type of population. So they must talk to each other, those aspects, all right? But we also have different types of population. Well, there could be more than that, but let's pick on these three for now. We have what we call the target population. And most of the time when we write, we don't distinguish between the accessible population and the target population. We just say population, of which is allowed, honestly. But these two are not the same. Let's look at the target population. The target population is the entire group of people or objects to which the researcher wishes to generalize the study findings. All right. For example, my target population could be the primary school learners in South Africa. That's the target. Think about this. If I say my target population, it's all the primary school learners in South Africa. Will I be able to reach all those learners? My answer is no. But what I can do, I can apply what I call accessible population so that I will be able to reach the target, the population which I can easily assess, which I can be easily able to reach to. That you call it the accessible population. That's the portion of the population to which the researcher has reasonable access to, right? We always do that. And basically what we are doing when we write the issue of the aspect of population, we are referring to the accessible population, because there's no way I'll say as welcome, I'll be able to say my population, it's all the learners in South Africa. I always like to, I can put it there, right, as my target. Then I can narrow it down to another aspect, which I call it the accessible population. To say, be aware as my reader that the learners in South Africa are so many across all the provinces. But in this study, I'm focusing only on learners from Gauteng province, then becomes my accessible. And even that one is too huge or too large again. So I can even narrow it down through my sampling now to say, all right, from Gauteng province, I'm going to sample, maybe I'll sample one municipality. Let's say, for example, I'll sample Ekurhuleni municipality. Can you see now? Then it's easy for me to reach the type of population through sampling. So at the same time, we are saying, even though you can put a broader population, you need also to try to narrow it down. And when we narrow it down, definitely we are taking it to a sample, all right? But look at this example of a target population. It says primary school learners in Gauteng province. In other words, I can take all primary school learners in South Africa and narrow this target population into accessible population. But like I've said earlier, most of the time, we don't differentiate between these two concepts, target and accessible. We just say population. If I say the study or the population of this study is all primary school learners in Gauteng province, it's sufficient. No one will ask me to say, welcome, why didn't you give the numbers for all learners in South Africa? No, I can give numbers for only this in this study. Then from there, I can come with my sample. All right. But remember that in my writing, actual writing of this section of population, I can also have mentioned the aspect to say in South Africa, we have so many provinces, so that the reader should not only think that there's only one province in South Africa. Then from there, the next sentence will say, based on this study only focus on Gauteng province. And remember that, guys, I'm putting all of this and also trying to assist you on the writing up on those sections. Because when you write up those sections, not everyone is aware about the situation of education in South Africa, or let alone the actual broader division of South Africa. Right? So you need to let your reader at least to have an understanding about where are you coming from with this writing. Okay? Well, there's some few terminologies which we always like to understand, especially when we are looking at sampling quickly, right? What are those terminologies? Well, we are going to talk about mostly about them in this presentation. The first one, it's a matter of population, which is your total set of units. We have covered that one. Then the sample, which is a subset of the population. Sometimes we say a sample is part of the population, okay? Then you also have the sample frame. Sometimes when you write, all right, I've seen it most of the time, but not on a honors level and so on. When you write, you present the population. Maybe it could be a subsection which says population, then you describe your population, then you say your sample, then you describe your sample, and sometimes can present your sample in the form of a table. Then from there, you talk about the sampling frame, right? What does it mean? It's a list from which to select your sample. All right, that's why I'm saying it can also be in the form of a frame or a table in that case. All right, and also you have to justify it. We'll talk about that also later. All right, and also it's about the units from which I will be selecting my sample. Complete list of everyone on everything you want to study. And remember, colleagues, when you talk about sampling, you also need to remember those different type of sampling techniques we spoke about last week. The probability sampling and also your non-probability sampling. And all the examples or types of probability sampling and also the types of non-probability sampling. And remember that when we spoke last week, it became clear that only one type of sampling technique can be used in qualitative. All right, I don't want to go there, but the rest of the sampling example of sampling techniques are used in quantitative. All right, your convenience, your stratified, you name it. Okay, your simple sample technique and all of those things. All right, so the other concept which you also need to be aware of is the sample design. How are you going to design your sample? The methods of sampling, whether it's probability or non-probability. I think I've already mentioned that one. You also need to tell us if you are saying that sample design, it is probability sampling. You tell us what is probability sampling. Then from there, you tell us about the technique you are going to use. First, describe what is probability sampling according to different scholars. Then from there, you tell us what techniques are you going to use. If you're saying you're going to use stratified techniques, then from there, you justify why stratified techniques, okay? Then you give the parameters, the characteristics of the population, all right? We've spoken about that one also. And also the statistics or the characteristics of the sample. So then also this one can also be combined with the sampling frame because sometimes we give the numbers there, especially in quantitative. Okay. All right. Let's go to look at sample and sample techniques. I think we've covered this. I just want to present it in a diagram form, honestly. Basically, all what's happening, it's your sample, it's your population there, the target population. Let's assume the target population is learners in Gauteng province, all right? All are the learners here. But because I can't reach this province, it's too huge. Remember that Gauteng province is one of the largest province, all right? I'm not comparing to Arab, but I know it's the largest one. And it has a lot of municipalities. So I can decide to say, I'm not going to focus in any of the municipalities, for example, Sidibeng or whatever. I'm just going to focus on let's take Ekurhuleni, right? I just want to focus on Ekurhuleni. So my sample, I can take it from this Ekurhuleni, okay? In other words, what I'll look at my population, but as I present the total population of these learners, my focus for the study, I'll sample it to Ekurhuleni. So I'll say how many of the learners I'm going to take from Ekurhuleni, okay? Then from there, that will be part of my sample. Okay, I think that's the easiest part.
Greetings, Doc.
Yes.
My question is when we narrow down, maybe let's say to Ekurhuleni, should that be indicated on the title?
Well, it's two ways. It's two ways, okay? It's two ways. If, for example, in your research title, you have given also a subtitle, definitely your subtitle will tell us to say your study is focused on a certain area. Let's say, for example, in your subtitle, you have Ekurhuleni municipality. Then definitely it means you are going to give us, for example, the population. Then that population, you are going to narrow it down to Ekurhuleni municipality if it's indicated in the title. That is obvious, okay? But if, for example, your title doesn't indicate any focus study area, you can still do that. You're allowed to do that. Because remember, you are indicating to the reader to say you are going to collect this data from only this participant. Because I'll have a question definitely. If, for example, you are saying to me, your sample is going to be all the learners in Gauteng province. Already have a question. How are you going to reach those learners? Even though you're doing a PhD, it's not possible. It's not possible. Because you need to talk about accessibility. You are not going to be able to access all those things. And someone said to me, it's easy to reach those people via online data collection instrument, but I still say it's not possible. Because remember that if you do that, especially if you are in education, you need to get permission, right? Definitely the permission will say, when you apply for permission, they will always want you to indicate the actual schools which you'll be focusing on. So what I'm trying to say that whether it's there, the focus study area you've indicated as a subtitle in your study or not, you can still narrow it down. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, my question is, I think you've covered it when you responded to the last question. As my research topic is on waste management, if it's my topic is waste management, and then the area that I'm looking at is Atteridgeville, but with drawing samples or in terms of my population target around dumping site, I have identified areas within Atteridgeville and not the whole Atteridgeville. So I think your previous answer, it summed up as to when, how do I then collect my sampling, which areas I'm going to use, but then it is covered from your explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we appreciate that. Someone else, the last one, then we move to the next slide, please.
My question is on when you have specified your accessible population, can you do that in the title before or after ethical clearance? Because someone was saying, if you know the school that you want to target, for example, do you say that in the title before ethical clearance or after ethical clearance?
Okay, simple. Remember that we are not supposed to identify the schools by giving their actual names. That's the first point you must know. We are not allowed to do that. All right. We can identify it, for example, to say all the primary schools in Atteridgeville or 2 primary schools from Atteridgeville. You don't need to specify their actual names on the title, and let alone in the document itself. All right. But when you apply for permission from Gauteng Department of Education, in that form, they will ask you to give the name of the schools. All right. But in your writing up of your document, starting from the title itself, the name of the schools are not supposed to be identified. You can refer to them as school A, school B, or whatever, but not the actual name of the schools. All right, because remember that if you identify them, some people can be able easily, when they read your document, they can easily find out about the name of the schools, and some schools, they feel bad about that. In the past, I just want to give you that example. In the past, we were allowed to identify even the name of the schools in the document itself. But going forward, because of ethics aspect, we have been advised not to indicate. So I agree with you. You can put it on your title, but don't mention the actual name of the school. All right? Maybe school A or school B or 2 schools from this area. Okay? We are allowed to do that. All right. Yeah. Okay. But remember that all right, I'll take 1, 2 hands only, then go to the next presentation. Before that, the other colleagues was talking about the waste management at Atteridgeville. It's allowed not to take the whole part of Atteridgeville. I've done it in one of my studies when I was doing my research around Ekurhuleni. There's an area called Tembisa, and it's divided into 2 sections or parts. There's a east and west. I took only one. It's either east or west, not both of them, because you find that there's a lot of learners. So you're allowed to do that.
Yes, my question is that I just want to understand quickly that if there is a difference between the accessible population and the sample population.
No. Let's get clear. We don't have something which is called sample population. We have what you call sample. All right? In other words, what I'm trying to say here, sometimes when you do our writing up, And I want to say to you honestly, guys, most of the time, we are not distinguishing between the target and the accessible population. We just use the one phrase, population, okay? But remember that if you have a distinction between the two, so you need to describe what is your target population. And if you look at the target population, it's more broader, all right? But the accessible population is the one which you'll be able to access easily as a participant. It's not your sample, it's still your population, okay? Then from that accessible population, then you can develop your sample. So that's how we need to write it up. Don't say the accessible population is your sample. No, it's not. Still, you have to come with a sample. If you are writing up just says target population, it's fine with me. Then from there, from the target population, come with your sample. But remember that the question we'll be having sometimes when we see that the target population is too large or too huge, especially when we are writing on a certain level, we can even correct that to say, no, let us narrow it down a little bit. All right. Then we start to narrow it down to accessible population. Then from there, from your accessible population, we take a sample. Because we cannot allow you to say the target population is all the learners from South Africa. That's a big question. How are you going to reach them? What methodology are you going to use to reach those learners? There are too many. So, but if you say, this is my target population, then you narrow it down to the accessible population. Then you say, all right, I'm going to take maybe Gauteng province. All right, learners from Gauteng province as my accessible population. Then from there, you develop a sample based on that. To say my sample here is only going to be learners from Sedibeng municipality, if you want to use Sedibeng. So it's easy to agree with you as a writer for a document. Okay, thank you. Let's quickly move to the next presentation. Thank you, guys. Okay, let's look at sampling now. Basically, sampling is a process whereby a group of individuals are selected, I think all of us will know that, from the entire population with the intention of representing the larger group. Please, this is very important. You don't just select the sample to say, okay, based on learners at the Ekurhuleni, for example, I'm going to select 20. It should be a representative sampling. In other words, your sample must represent the entire population. In other words, every member of the population must be represented in the sample. I think that it's easy to put in this way. All right? Your sample, basically, it must tell us that it represents every member of your population. That's why we talk about the sampling techniques. It's there to assist you, okay? So that every member of the population is represented. And field states this: it describes a sample as a smaller collection of units from a population used to determine truths about the population. In other words, when you sample, you're still able to generalize because you get the truth about the population. You cannot put each and every one in your document, or you cannot sample everyone, all the people, definitely. Because if you sample everyone, how are you going to analyze the document? Okay, yes, remember that now. This sample, you need also to look at it from both methodology. Okay, we've spoken about qualitative last week. We've spoken about the point of saturation and so on. But you see what is required or recommended. I'm not saying that, colleagues, you need to agree with me, but this is the recommended sample size as per different methodology. Your sample size is very important, okay? Because we don't want to have a question with I think this far from my side, as I've been reading students' work, I never had so much question about the sample size. I haven't. I found the sample size to be enough and sufficient, okay? But we don't want to find a stage whereby your sample size is going to be questioned. But Roscoe, as cited in Sikaran, proposes the following rule of thumbs. In other words, what they are saying, it's just something which we need to think about. It's not saying it's dogmatic, all right? But we are saying it's just a rule of thumb. And remember that, why are they bringing the rule of thumb? To say, when you write your document, justify why this sample size by citing the relevant sources. And no one is going to query. If you say in the study, the sample size is so much, and this is also supported by the writing by so and so, then you do in-text referencing, then in your reference list, you give the author's description and so on. No one is going to query that. But remember that if your document is going for external examination, the external examiner is going to look at that. So, all right, you've cited this as a justification for them for the sample size. Let me go and do my research about this author. We normally do that. We do research about these authors. If I found that what you are indicating here, it does not correlate with what I've done research on as an external examiner, then I'm going to put a question mark. So you are going to correct that part. But if you agree, both of us, then give a thumb up. Okay? All right. Let's quickly look at this now. The sample size larger than 30. I think we understand that. If my sample is 30 and above, but less than 500, in other words, from 30 to 449 or 500, just to put it precise, that is appropriate for most research. In other words, we say, if you have a sample size, especially in quantitative, of 500 participants, it's appropriate, according to Roscoe, as cited by Sakaran. So that's what writing. You say the sample size is 500, and this is justified by these authors. That's it. No one is going to query that. Okay? But remember that this sample size of, let's say, 500, it does not been determined by the population. Please. Okay? It's just a sample size. You may find that your target population or your accessible population is 10,000 learners, but you sample only 500. It's justified. You could also check, all right, here I was just wanted to say, you can also do some tests in your SPS and check if the sample size is enough and so on. Okay, let's package for SPSS that aspect. But where samples are to be broken into sub-samples, remember, what does it mean? It means you have a sample, then this sample, you break it into sub-sample. In other words, for me, my understanding is that you use a certain sample technique, a sample technique. In other words, there is a sample technique which you'll be using. If I may ask from you guys, what sample technique can you use where you find that you have a sub-sample? What type of sample technique is that one? Under the probability sampling technique, which one? It's your stratified sampling, né? Oh, okay, sorry for that. Maybe my question was not clear. But basically what I'm trying to say here, to have a sub-sample, you can use a technique, a sampling technique, which we call stratified, right? You put a strata. Remember, I spoke about that last week, okay? So, if, for example, in this part, it says, where samples are to be broken into sub-samples, for example, you can have male, females. In schools, maybe you can have intermediate phase, foundation phase, intermediate, and senior phase. Those are stratas which we get in our South African schools, is it? Okay? So you can sample according to that. To say, I'm going to take part of learners from the intermediate phase, or part of learners from the foundation phase and part of the learners from the senior phase. Or I will say, I will have my stratified sample. My strata will be all foundation phase, where I will take part of the learners from grade R, part of the learners from grade 1, if I'm not mistaken, grade 2, and grade 3. It's still stratified, okay? Then I can leave, maybe my study, it doesn't focus only learners who are only intermediate phase and maybe on the senior phase, only foundation phase. So I can use a strata there also, okay? But it says where samples are to be broken into samples, males or females, juniors or seniors, etc. I've just given the other examples there. A minimum sample size of 30 for each category is necessary. All right. In other words, for each category, we are looking at 30. All right. So if I have 2 strata, or stratas, if one to put in that way, male and female, it means I need to take 30, 30. Then it gives me 60. Right? If, for example, my strata is divided maybe into 4. For example, if I sample from foundation phase and that these grades there, grade R, all right, grade 1, 2, up to 3, then it means I need to take 30, 30, 30, 30, and so on. So that's how it needs to be presented. So that there is, remember we spoke about this, colleagues. I want just to come there again. There should be representation, and you always emphasize equal representation. So let's get this now. If, for example, I want just to check you guys, if my population is 30, all right, and I want to have a sample, it means I need to sample all of them. Okay, I can't take part, but it's all of them, because remember we've spoken about this 30. So if 30, definitely I'll take all of them. But if it's above 30, definitely I can apply a little bit of a strata there. So if my sample is less than 30, it means my study won't be validated. Okay, so we need to look at least from 30 and above. Okay, but I've just put this as a point where I've said, is this suggested rule of thumb according to Roscoe also applicable in qualitative research? What's your thinking about that? Is it applicable also in qualitative research? Oh, someone says no. All right, I got a response from the chat. Mostly it's no, no.
It's not applicable.
All right, thank you. Let's justify it. Why not? I agree.
Because in qualitative study, it's not about numbers.
Yes, I agree with you. It's about what? Sorry to other colleagues can come in. He said it's not about numbers in qualitative study. It's about what? Let's try to close that gap. Thank you, sir. It's about the point of saturation. So your numbers definitely, but at the same time, please be careful. It doesn't mean that we are not going to see any numbers in your qualitative study. You are going to tell us to say, for example, you have sampled 20 participants. It's a number. 20 is a participant. 20 is a number. So people don't think that there won't be any writing with stipulated number. But at the same time, we justify to say, really, numbers are not so important in qualitative study because it's about the views, the perception, the opinion of the participant. And also, we have what you call sometimes a point of saturation, okay? But if you say, you as a researcher, I'm going to interview 50 participants. And when you're busy interviewing all the 50 participants, you don't reach the point of saturation. It's also fine, you interview all of them. But the point of saturation will arise if you realize that when you start to interview some of the participants, you are getting almost the same responses to all the questions. So our argument is that there's no need for you to proceed with your interview process because the answers are going to be the same. the perceptions are going to be the same. But if, for example, you have targeted 50 people to interview, and you don't reach any point of saturation from participant 1 up to the 50th one, it's fine. We allow you to do that. Okay. Okay, I think we are covered with the sample size there. Let's quickly look at the stages in the selection of sample. Let me just check if it's not jumping here. Okay. The first step or stage, when you select a sample, you define the target population. Definitely you need to tell us about the population. Okay. The next stage, what you do, you select the sample frame. Then from there, you determine the sample techniques which you are going to use. And the next stage, we start to plan the procedure for selecting sample units. And the fifth stage, we determine the sample size. Then from there, we select the actual sample units. I think I can't go further in these stages. Okay, but basically what I'm trying to say is that you need to plan, right? When you decide on your sample. You should not just to say, my sample is going to be 20 participants. Plan it. Think about the sample size. Think about the sample technique you'll be using. It's very important because the question will be saying, you have determined this sample. What informed you? What sample technique have you used? Justify that sample technique. Those are the questions we normally ask ourselves to put in their writings. Okay. Let's look at the distinction between these two types of researchers, the qualitative and the quantitative researchers. What makes them to differ? All right. One, when you look at the quantitative researcher, they are more there to seek statistical validity. That's why they are more concerned about numbers. Okay. And they also run all those statistics aspects. It could be inferential statistics and so on. Okay, those are the quantitative. But the qualitative, they are more there to seek the point of saturation, to say, look, numbers for me are not going to assist me. But when I was interviewing my participant, I've realized that when I reach the 10th participant, all the answers I'm getting in all the questions are the same. Hence, I've reached a point of saturation that I can't go beyond and interview the 11th, the 12th, and the 15th participant. So you justify that. But also, when you look at the quantitative researcher, they can be generalized to the population. But here in your qualitative, sample size do not count. Yes, in other words, it's almost like we have indicated that only the sample size for us doesn't matter. You can have 10, you can have 15, you can have 20, and so on. No one will say, by the way, your study is within learners at Ekurhuleni municipality and almost 5,000 learners. Why have you interviewed only 20 participants? All right, because you are more about the opinions, about the views, about the perceptions. All right, good morning. I just kindly want to know that in sample section, must I explain non-probability? Yes. I think in your, you may start to say, this study will be using non-probability sampling, and non-probability sampling is about this and that and that. And remember that, guys, I'm talking about different levels here. In your honors, definitely want to see those. In your masters, you want to see. But in your PhD, sometimes we say, why do we explain this concept? Because already, remember your study in your PhD is more advanced, okay? You don't need to describe to me what non-probability sampling is all about. No, but you need to describe me the technique you've used and justify it. Okay, but in your masters and below, definitely describe to say, for example, this study will be on non-probability sampling technique, on non-probability sampling techniques, and the example of it which you'll be using is stratified and why stratified and all of this. So we want to see that writing a little bit. Okay. Let's go to the next one. It's quite a lengthy chart. I think this one really, you must also try to make sure that you don't narrow your sample too much. Okay? Because sometimes when you narrow it too much, you end up not getting the data which you want. I can still stick with the branch. I can stick with the branch. All right, so this is my branch. Then I make sure that in my branch, I stratify it a little bit. I don't narrow it down to departments, but I stratify it. All right, to say from this branch, maybe I'll take someone, if for example, my study is not only on one department or focus area of functionality, maybe I can stratify it a little bit, but don't narrow it too much, okay? And remember, guys, when you say to you narrow your sample, it doesn't mean that your data you collect only to that sample. And be careful about that. I've seen it, for example, if let's say, I say to myself, let's give you this example. I take foundation phase, and foundation phase got maybe these 4 grades, grade R to grade 3, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. If I say I need to get a representative, let's say I take maybe 3 per grade, which is going to be 3, 6, 9, 12. All right. It doesn't mean that if I use a questionnaire, I'm going to give a questionnaire to only 12 teachers. No, I'll give the questionnaire to all the grade R teachers and all the grade 1 teachers, grade 2 and grade 3 teachers. And the reason why I'm doing that, colleagues, in my case, I've learned it from experience. If you give your data collection instruments to the specified sample, sometimes you find that the responses you are getting there, you can't even use those responses. So you're stuck with this completed questionnaire. Let's say, for example, in grade R, we gave it to 3 teachers, but only 1 teacher completed the questionnaire to the fullest. So you're stuck now on how to analyze these 2 questionnaires. So, but if you have given it to all the teachers in grade R, you still have another sample to pick on, because you are saying, I want 3 per grade, but these 2 are not good, then you can also pick another 2. So it gives you a broader pool where you can draw your sample responses. Okay, so be careful about that. All right. Or if your sample is 20 people that you need to identify via questionnaire, is that I don't think it's enough. Maybe in that case, what if, for example, you have not already got your ethical permission, maybe think about qualitative. Maybe conduct interviews. It's not enough. Okay, it's not enough. Rather, I have your interviews in that case. Yes, I think according to this author, all right? Please, like I was saying, justify it according to certain authors. If you say this 200 sample, I'm going to sample in quantitative 200 participants, and this is justified by this author and that author, no one is going to query that, all right? There's a hand. Let's take one hand and we move on, please. It's a hand which is up. I can't see the colleague there, the name of the colleague.
I think it's me. My name is Isaac. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. I just want to clarify based on the sample frame, because I think when I'm doing my study, in most cases, I struggle with sort of defining the sample frame, and it plays a huge impact into helping me to sample. So please clarify it for me.
Okay. I think there are various authors who describe what a sample frame is. My suggestion is that you need to source those authors, honestly. There are a lot of them. But basically, like I've said here, it's a list from which to select your sample. It's a frame. Basically, what you're saying to me, what I'm saying to you here, a sample frame. You can also present it in the form of a table. I always do that, especially in quantitative, where I put my population, all right, together with my sample and my sample technique. Then becomes my sample frame. Okay, then I'll tell to say the population, for example, is so many participants. I give the number there in quantitative. Then from there, I'll describe the sample. All right, what sample technique what sample I'll be using, probability or non-probability. Then from there, I'll give the number of the sample to say I'm going to sample, let's say 400 participants. Then from there, but still I'm going to use a certain type of a sample technique. For example, I'll use stratified sample technique. Then I break it down according to different stratas. All right. If, for example, I can give you an example of the one I've just used now. If I say my sample is going to be all the foundation phase learners or teachers, let's say teachers, then I give them according to strata to say maybe in my sample technique, this is a strata I'm going to follow. I'm going to look at grade R teachers, so many, grade 1 teachers, so many, and so on up to grade 3 teachers. That's how I put my sample frame. Remember that it's more on a table. Then I go down under the table, just I put some little bit of flesh to put some weighting around it. But the table will be there. Then I describe this table. So it works better for me in that way. That is my frame, my sample frame. Okay?
Thank you.
So yours could be different, but what I'm trying to say, sometimes the table does wonders for you. Then you explain the table or describe it. And also, if you put in the form of a table, if you are going to present your work in any platform, maybe a colloquium or a conference and so on, you just project the table. Then you talk over the table itself. Okay. I think now we need to move a little bit. Let's look at the sample techniques, especially in quantitative, then we go to qualitative, right? We agree that in quantitative research, both probability sample and non-probability sample are applicable. Make note of that. But in your qualitative, only non-probability sample is applicable. And again, only one type of non-probability sampling you can use in qualitative, right? But basically what I was trying to say, starting from the scratch there in this slide, is that in quantitative research, both probability sampling and non-probability sampling are applicable. But when you go to the qualitative study, all right, only non-probability sampling technique is applicable. And the example of that, we also got only one, which is purposefully sampling and so on. Sample per purpose, okay? The others are not applicable, like you are stratified, like you are simple, and all of those. But when you look at the simple random sampling, it's where the members are selected in such a way that all members of the population can get equal representation. This is an example. You want to select a simple random sample. You want to select a simple random sampling of, I think should be sampling there, of 100 learners of school A. You can therefore assign a number to every learner in the school database from 1 to 1,000, okay? Because let's assume that your database is 1,000 learners in this school A. So you give numbers from 1 to 1,000. Then you can play with your technology, where you can have what you call a random number generator. Definitely, you can do that with most of these technologies, all right? Then the technology, you tell it that you want to select randomly 100 learners. You may find that maybe you have selected learner 2, then you went to learner 7, 18, and so on, until there are 100. Technology can assist you with that. Or alternatively, in our case, when we're using the simple random sampling, especially when technology was not there, we just have to give numbers from 1 to 1,000. Then you put those numbers maybe in a hat, right? Then from there, if you want to pick 100, you just pick them. You do what you normally do for example, in a lotto way, you know, the lotto way, but you put it in a hat. Then you pick the first one up to until you pick the last one, which is 100. Then from there, you check the numbers. But now we have technology, guys. Please, let's use the technology. The stratified, which I like it the most. I like stratified random sampling because for me, it gives them better results, especially if I'm dealing with certain large number of population and especially in some of the schools and so on. I always apply stratified random sampling, right? Okay, the stratified random sampling is whereby the population is grouped into groups, 2 or more, and referred to as strata. I'm not going to explain this, guys. I think we're working on the stratified. But what I'm trying to say, I'm not going to talk about this stratified random sampling. I think we have done it now many times in this presentation. Everyone understand. But this is an example there. So I'm not going to go through that example. Okay. Then you have what you call the cluster. And please don't confuse the stratified and the cluster. Okay? They are not the same. Okay? The cluster sampling is a technique in which clusters of participants that represent the population are identified and included. There's one student there, a colleague there, who was talking about departments and so on. That's an example of a cluster. Okay? An example is that I like this example where I say, for example, if I have campuses in 7 provinces, sometimes I don't have to reach all the campuses, all right? All right, and they also have almost the same number of employees. We don't have the capacity to travel to every campus. For example, even now, in this institution, we have campuses, all right? So if I'm sitting here in the main campus, all right, if you have the word main campus, I'm not sure. Let's say there's the Sunnyside campus, and I want information from Florida. I don't need to go to Florida. I can get someone there to give me the information, all right? So in cluster, it means you are grouping this participant or sample into certain identified aspects, okay? And all of them, they are carrying the same probabilities or the same aspects. They are almost the same. And maybe the numbers, they can differ there and there, but they always have the same numbers. If, for example, we say, I'm just giving you this as an example, in each campus, let's say we have 4 campuses, and all the 4 campuses are offering the same courses according to the same colleges. Let's say all the 4 campuses, they have the same colleges. So if I want information from campus D, I don't have to travel to campus D. I just need to source the information by requesting it from the campus representative there, all right? So in this example, it does make a little bit of, it's not so much confusing, but you need to indicate what is cluster sampling and also describe your cluster. That's all what you need to do, all right? But most of the time, I don't use the cluster sampling, but other colleagues, maybe they are using it in their studies. We also have what you call the systematic sampling. Okay, someone says, does that making the 7 campuses a population? No, not exactly. Not exactly. Remember that within these 7 campuses, we are saying in this example, all with roughly the same number of employees. Okay, it's just a description to say we have 7 campuses. But what's your population? Basically, these are the number of employees in each of the campus. That becomes your population when you add them all. Let me attend to the chart quickly. It says, if my sample is like this, 1 head of department in foundation phase, 2 teachers in foundation phase, 1 head of department. Yes, you can use a table, but I don't understand about this 1 head of department. Or in other words, basically you are going to sample teachers and head of department according to the different phases. It's fine, put it in the table, all right? Then you say phase, maybe the first column should be the phase, then your foundation phase, then head of department, then teachers. Then you give the representation of numbers in the form of a table. Then justify why, and tell us about that sample technique. Please, it's very important. to have a table and you don't describe the sample techniques, it's a problem. Because I'll ask you, what sample technique have you used there and why? Right? So your writing up also should cover that. Okay. All right. I want us to look at systematic sampling. It's whereby every case number or subject from the list of the population is selected. In other words, you select your participant in an interval way. That's why I always use the word interval. But where do you start? It's a very good point. Where do you start to have this interval? All right. And another author says it's a method of sampling from a list of the population so that the sample is made up of every certain member or the next member on the list after randomly selecting a certain point from the first one to the next one. Right? That's why, like I've said here, for me, it's more about interval sampling. All right? But the correct way is systematic. This is a simple example. Where do you start? I have this as a simple example. Let's assume, consider choosing a systematic sample of 20 members. In other words, you want to choose 20 members from a population listed from 1 to 836. How you do that? Please, colleagues. Your system also, you can generate this systematic sampling technique using whatever platform you have in your availability. It can also do it for you. But the easiest and the other way of doing it manually, you start by doing this. All right? You start first to find the K and divide by 20. In other words, your K, you get it, this number, which you want to sample, you get it by taking the total population, in this case is 836, then you divide by the number you want to sample. In this case, it's going to give you this number. So you round it off now. It's 14.8. We don't have a number of people whom we can call them 41.8. You round it off, then it means it's 42. All right? So the next sampling in the interval is the 42nd person. Okay? So where do you start? You randomly select a number from 1 to 42. All right. In that case, we say randomly. In other words, the number which you select, it should be between 1 and 42. It should not be 42, please. It could be 26. Okay? It could be 17. It could be 12. You just select randomly. Then from there, if you selected 12, the next one which you'll be selecting, you count 42. Then you say 12, then the next one is going to be 42. All right? From 12, you select between 12 and 42. Then you select the next number after that. In this case, it means if I've selected 18, I'm not going to start to sample from the first one. No. All right? Because my selected number is 18. But if my selected number, because remember, I've said to randomly select between 1 and 42. If I've selected 1, all right, in this example, then it means the next one is going to be 42. Then the next one, I'll jump 40, I'll count up to 42, then I select the next number, just like that. Okay? So it means in between, it's going to be a little bit, it's going to be 42, 42, 42, 42, all right, in between. But if I selected this one in this example, colleagues, you can see what's going to happen. Then the first one is going to be 18. Then the next one, 60. Then 102. Then 144 until I reach this. All right. I think in this example, it's been done strategically so that at the end, you also select the last number there, which is 836. 816, sorry. That will be the last one. I think it's simple, colleagues. Eh? Right. But technology also, like I've said, can does wonders for you in that case. All right. Yeah, maybe just a little bit of stretching. Maybe let's quickly look at this as an example. We give it 2 minutes. It's about a systematic sampling. It says if I want to select a sample of 25 learners in my school, whereby the total learners enrollment is 100, how many I will sample? Okay, colleagues, let's check if we have some few responses there. Okay, I got 4, I got 4. Someone said I will sample 50. 4, okay. Let's quickly look at, I think there's a solution just to save time from my side. Basically, it says if I want to select a sample of 25 learners in my school whereby the total learners enrollment is 100, therefore I will divide the total number of 100 with the sample of 25. That will give me 4. I think all of us will agree about the 4, but where do I start? All right. The starting point could be the number between 1 and 4, like we have indicated, which in this case, maybe I can choose 3, right? Then the first person I'll be selecting them. The third learner will be selected first, followed by the 7th, and so on and so on. In other words, I will have an interval of 4, starting from the third participant or the third learner. Okay, so we have the interval of 4, which is 3, the third learner, the 7th, then the 11th learner, and so on and so on. That will be the interval. Okay, thank you. Thank you guys for giving the response then. All right. We also have the convenience sampling. Briefly, let's look at convenience sampling as one of the example of the non-poverty sample method. It's a process whereby whoever is available at a specific time. In other words, it's convenient. I just look at the learners who are available at a specific time. For example, I've just given this one. If, for example, you are researching opinions about student support services in your university. So after each of your tasks, let's say I'm teaching the task, then what I will do, I will ask the fellow student to complete a survey on the topic. All right, that's convenience because I was teaching them. Then I say, guys, here's a survey, complete it. All right. This is a convenient way to gather data. As data have only been sampled in your class, therefore it's not a representative of all students in your university. You must bear that in mind. You are not representing all the students in the university because you sampled only from your own class. Maybe there are only 40 or 50 students, okay? Even though they'll give you their views or opinions about student support services, okay? But still, it's not a representative of all the students in that university, okay? So I can't, yes, I may go further and do my writing up and justify why I've used sampling this convenience sampling technique, okay? I can justify that up. But remember, at the same time, when I generalize, I need to indicate that the generalization, it does not cover all the students in my university because I've just used a convenience sampling technique. And I can use, mostly I like convenience sampling techniques when I do my pilot. It works better for me, right, when I do my pilot study. When spoken about the purpose safe sampling, where we said this one, it's more related, please, it's more related to qualitative, all right? We can use it, we can use it also in quantitative, but it's more on qualitative. Participants are selected based on specific characteristics, experience, or knowledge. In other words, how do you select your participant? You are looking at specific aspects. If I'm saying I'm looking at the students or this participant or these teachers because of their experience, it comes purposive sampling because the focus is on a certain skill, which is experience and so on. Okay. This is an example. You can sample your participants because you want to get the understanding of the first generation students. In other words, if I want to get my understanding about the experience and opinions of the first generation students in my university, I must apply purposive sampling. In other words, I won't sample everyone. I'll sample only those participants who are the first generation students. I think all of us will know what the first generation students are, okay? Those are the students who are the first from their families to come to university. No one within that generation have set a foot at the university. The first one. Then I select only those. Okay. Quota, I think we are familiar with quota, guys, sampling. We've used it especially in the past and especially after 1994, where there was a quota system in some of our sporting codes. All right, could be soccer, could be rugby, and so on. That was quota. So I'm not going to go further with that. Snowballing, it's very important also. I think I've seen how snowballing has taken place, especially during COVID. And I enjoyed that type of test by one of our students, honestly. She was doing a master's by then. So what happened with the student, let me just firstly explain what snowballing is, so to understand it better. It's when you don't know the best people to study due to complicity of events. Think about COVID. We have a lot of complicity in regards to COVID. So what happened with these students? These students had an ethical clearance from the institution, all right? This institution, by the way, all right? So in a study, she said she's going to do quantitative method where she's going to issue out questionnaire to the participant, okay? Now, COVID came in, and the ethics was given to the students, I think it was in 2019. So 2020, it's when the country was shut down because of COVID. So the students have to continue with the study. Now the student was struggling to get participants because the student cannot go and do face-to-face questionnaire or give the questionnaires to the principals. Because wanted to give the questionnaire to the principal, then the principal will give the questionnaire to the teachers. We are under COVID. The country was shut down. So the student, what the student is to do, the student with the supervisor, they have to bring another way, which was not in line with the ethics permission given by the institution. But remember that ethics, it says you may change slightly, but not the bulk of the component, especially the methodology. You may change it and you justify it. So the student with the supervisor, they change a little bit in regards to the methodology and justify the condition to say it's because of this complexity of events like COVID and so on and so on. That was the writing up in the document. So now the student cannot give up the questionnaire. The student what did said, okay, I'm going to do an online questionnaire. But at the same time, this online questionnaire through Google Form, if I want to mention it, I just want to mention that. I need also to have the link to be forwarded to the teachers. So the student gave the link to the principal, right? They were communicating online, but the principal could not reach the teachers now. So the student with the supervisor came with another way of sampling. They said, let us use snowballing sampling. By snowballing, what they did, they asked the principal to say, don't you have another principal or principals who can assist with this regards? Maybe a principal of school B or school D and C. Then the principal said, yes, I can forward the link to some of the principals. Then the principal forward the link to other principals. And the student was able to collect data from those learners from the school. But when you look at the ethics, those were not the identified school and also the teachers. So it was snowballing. That's how this methodology was applied. And even in the writing up of that dissertation, I enjoyed reading it because I was one of the person who was also giving feedback on that. It was so well positioned on how snowballing was used during COVID. Maybe in my other presentation, I'll share also the author of the dissertation because now it's been published. It's on the private domain. If I remember, I'll share that dissertation. Okay. Let's quickly look at qualitative now. Researchers in qualitative research select the participants based on some of these criteria. We've spoken about that. Could be characteristics, knowledge, experience, you name it. In other words, there should be specific criteria. You cannot just select your participant randomly. I just want to give this example. I've applied also these purposive sampling techniques in one of my studies. I think I was doing my PhD by then, where I had both mixed methods. I collected data through quantitative and analyze it. And I did also qualitative data collection, where I interviewed a certain number of school heads. It was more purposive sampling because I have to look at their experience. I have to look at the knowledge in regards to the topic I was researching about. That's why I have to pick them and choose them in a very good way so that my data could be well informed, because I could not, there's sometimes other principals, for example, they don't have knowledge in most of the stuff. Some of them, you may find it's a new principal and it's not knowledgeable on a certain aspect you are researching about. So you can't put that person in your interviews. So you want someone who has knowledge and also they have the experience. In my writing up, I indicated why I have chosen or selected this participant for my qualitative data. I have to justify it, okay? But look at what's happening here in regards to qualitative research. It says the purposive sampling techniques is mostly used in qualitative, and we've spoken about that one, all right? This is clear that no probability sampling technique can be used in qualitative study. Please, we need to be careful about our writing up, all right? Other students, they'll talk about probability sampling, and they're talking about qualitative research. Then I have a problem with that, okay? But others will say, I've just used stratified sampling, all right, as a technique. But when you look at the research, it's qualitative. Then I ask myself, how does stratified goes into qualitative? So we need to be careful about our writing up. Okay, let's quickly look at the sample size. We've spoken about the sample size in quantitative. We remember that. All right. Now let's look at qualitative. These are some of the authors, guys, you can cite to justify your sample size in qualitative. There are many, please. All right. There are many. But the first one, Atla and Atla, they state that the sample size in qualitative, it should be between 12 and 16. But the average they are recommending is 30. In other words, they say they don't see you interviewing 60 participants, maybe up to 30 or 12. Please, guys, you cannot say to me that you have interviewed 2 participants. That's a problem. It's a no. I don't think there's any author who talks about that. Okay, so when you write your sample size in qualitative, indicate or justify why have you selected 7, let's say 7 participants. If you have 7 participants, why? Therefore, in that case, your point of saturation should be highly described there, because we are saying you cannot interview less than 12 participants in qualitative, according to this author. Okay, so if you have 10, you must tell us why did you interview up to 10 participants. Maybe you justify it by the point of saturation and so on. Okay, it's allowed. But Bernard also comes in there. They say between 10 and 20. So it means 10, you're still covered according to Bernard. Okay, but according to Atla and Atla, you are not covered with 10. So they say 12. But Bernard says, no, it's fine. 10 to 20, it's allowed. All right. So when you justify your sample size in qualitative, if you have 10, justify it. You can say, I've interviewed 10 participants because according to Bernard, the minimum requirement could be 10 participants to be interviewed in qualitative and so on. So your writing up should be more informative around that. But Body also comes in now, right? I think this one is a bit outdated. In 2005, he said 12, but here he focuses on individual and also focus group. It says for focus group, there should be 12. In other words, her focus was more on groups, right? To say you cannot have a focus group where you put 20 participants around one table. It's not allowed. At least 12. The reason why, so that you as an interviewer will be able to control the process, all right? But if you have 20, I'm telling you, only one person is going to respond in the table, and it's going to dominate the others. But if it's 12, you are able to control the movement of discussion. But Creswell also comes in now, talks about between 20 and 30. All right, there's Creswell, you know, we know how Creswell is it? Yeah. He says, not 12, I want 20. All right? But Ritchie also comes in. He suggests not more than 50. In other words, cannot interview more than 50 individuals in regards to qualitative. Whereas the other author said it should be between 8 up to 8. So yeah, those are some of the views of these authors. Basically, what I'm trying to say in putting these scholars is that when you have your qualitative sample size, justify it by citing certain authors. There are many of them, honestly. Okay, you can even go to Google Scholar and ask authors who are talking about the sample size in qualitative. You're going to get even the recent one. Right? I'm not sure about the recent publication of Creswell, whether this is still remaining in his writing or there's something different. Okay. Then I think we'll take the question at the end. Let's go to the writing up. How do you write up this section in your document? Research proposal. How do you write this? In your honors, how do you write the population and the sample size? Suggestion? The writing up in the research methodology chapter, especially if you're doing your research report and your research proposal. Firstly, when you write about the population, you describe or define what population is according to various authors. That could give you 1 or 2 paragraphs. It depends on your writing. And then after you indicate the study population and so on, all right? I always say 2 or 3 paragraphs or 1 paragraph is sufficient. It depends on your writing. If, for example, they say in your assignment for population, they want 2 pages or 1 page, it means, or they say 2 pages, it means you expand on your writing there, okay? All right, the sample size and the sample techniques, the same. I always start by describing the concept or define it, especially in your masters and your honors. It's where we start, all right? Then you describe the sample as per research methodology, provide the sample size, like we have indicated that you can also use tables there, okay? And also you describe the sample technique used, right? And you justify why this sample technique is relevant for your study. Then I said at the end, NP, this is applicable in both quantitative and quantitative methods. I think, colleagues, I've just given you a simple way on how to write up these sections, all right? So just look at your document. Those who are doing maybe your honors in psychology and so on, look at your document, the requirement in that assignment on how to write this population and sample and factor some of the points. If you are doing your masters, I've already given something for your research proposal, so you can also see on how you factor those aspects in. Okay, let me just quickly go to the charts first. I always like to start from the chart. The first one at the bottom, still you are saying, is it necessary to describe the sample size if you use mixed design approach? I think you have to. Remember that we've spoken about the mixed methods, okay? And I've said in one of the workshops, those who were there, I've said the way we are projecting the mixed method, it has evolved a lot now, okay? In the past, we were just talking about 2 methods within the mixed method, the quantitative and the qualitative. So if we are still going to do that in your writing now, whatever writing you are doing in your study, still you have to describe, right? You have to describe that. But like I've said, I'm hoping that we'll be having a session on a mixed method alone. That's what I've been promised. that you guys are going to be given a section on the mixed method, so that you'll be able to see how it has evolved up to this far. Okay, so let's park that one. I think SM, yes, it's writing up. Remember that the writing up. I can also use that example of writing up for my PhD. But at the same time, because the levels are not the same. When I write for my PhD, when I write for my master's, when I write for my honors, they are not on the same level. All right? In your PhD, it's more advanced. So it means there will be lots of content you'll be providing there. But also in your master's, there'll be a lot of content. So you can also use it for your master's. Sometimes you can see that I've put them in a point form or in a bullet there. You think that it's not so much. It's too much. Okay? It's too much. All right? So you can also use it for your assignment. But also look at the assignment brief, because I always say to my students, I give you the overall approach of a certain writing up, but maybe your assignment brief got some specifics. So you must follow the specifics, but also try to embed what I've just shared with you. Because sometimes when students are following the specifics in the assignment, they end up not having a lengthy document. So my suggestions also can come to expand your writing in that aspect. Okay. I think you are bringing something about the paradigm. This is it's more about when you talk about the research design. Remember that for whether it could be quantitative, mixed method, you need to describe the research design. Your research design, basically, the first thing which we describe there, you may start to tell us what is the research design and all of this. Then from there, you talk about the research paradigm. Describe your research paradigm, whether it's coming from this angle or that angle. Then you also have to describe your research approach, whether it's deductive or deductive and so on. Right? Then from there, you describe your research methodology. If it's qualitative, make sure that your research methodology in qualitatives also talks to the about aspect. It talks to your research approach. It talks to your research paradigm, because all of these things, they must talk to each other. All right? Then in your research methodology, you're going to talk about these things like data collection, data analysis, population, ethics, and all of those aspects. So, yeah. I think I've just said a lot there. I don't know why. In other words, what you're saying to me, you can use more than one data collection instrument. You are allowed, okay? But be careful. If I look here, already you're talking about data collection instrument, which is more triangulation, all right? Document study is one of those. You can use observation, you can use individual interviews, you can use focus group interviews. You are allowed. All right, but remember that when you develop those questions, they are not supposed to be the same, by the way. Okay, you are allowed. For me, at PhD level, honestly, I don't expect you to extensively describe the concept, honestly. All right, and let me tell you, sometimes students, when I say to them at PhD, you may give just a brief, or you may briefly, because remember that at PhD, what we want to find out from you, we want to find out from you as a student to say, you are able to bring an argument, you are able to bring your voice, all right? But at your master's, you want to check if you are able to do independent research. You are able to study and look at what other scholars are saying. That's why descriptions comes in there mostly. All right, but at PhD, definitely. If you want to describe concept at PhD, at the end, it's not about saying so and so define this concept like this and that. What is your view? What's your opinion? What is your voice about this concept? We want your voice now, more. Okay, so yes, other students are bringing that a little bit, but the focus is not on that, honestly. All right. Okay, I think we need to move now. Let's give people who have raised their hand a chance, because they become impatient now. All right, let me just look at this too quickly. I'm not going to take your chat question. Thank you. I think I've been answering most of yours. Let me take other colleagues, please. I'll answer it after this. You are on the chat also. I'm not sidelining you. right? Let me look at this one. It says I'm doing qualitative study with 12 participants. Yeah, I think that, yeah, and be careful. Sorry, I think I agree with your supervisor. I think I agree with your supervisor here. Okay, if in your ethical permission which you have been given, you specify that there are going to be 12, you stick on the 12. And maybe in your writing up, you are going to indicate why you are not able to interview 12 participants. You are able to interview 7 of those and so on. But if you can have a further discussion, maybe based on what you have discussed today with your supervisor, and share with your supervisor another sampling technique like snowballing, and share with your supervisor on how snowballing it's been done. Maybe your supervisor will buy into your request. Then you can apply maybe snowballing. Okay, but I'm trying to say, talk with your supervisor.
Good morning, Doc.
Morning, Livingston.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Yourself today?
Very well, thanks. Right. I have seen the numbers that you have flagged for different scholars with regards to the numbers that should be included, that you should have as your respondents when you are doing qualitative study. Now, what determines the number so that you can say it's sufficient for my study? Is there a method that you need to use to make such a determination so that the one who examines or your supervisor cannot say you have interviewed a few people? Thank you.
I did hear your question, all right? But basically remember that it depends on the writing up. When you do your research proposal for your master's, for argument's sake, you are going to put some numbers there, all right? You're going to put some numbers. And now, to determine the actual sample size, you are the one who's supposed to convince us to say this number of sample, let's say 500. Where do you get the 500 from? Which author justified that? If, for example, I'm saying I'm going to sample maybe 50 participants, which author can I cite to justify my sample size? And no one, like I've said, no one is going to argue with you. Okay? No one. Because we are going to talk about the sample technique and also the sample size. And if you say to me, definitely my sample technique is stratified and my sample size is going to be maybe 60 participants based on the following strata, and this author also argues that this could be a justified sample size, then you cite the author. No one is going to argue with you. Okay? But like I was saying earlier, is that when you do external examination, sometimes we want to verify these aspects to say you are not lying to us. I'm not saying that students are lying, but what I'm trying to say, these are the real facts. Then I go online and check different scholars. If you have indicated one scholar, then say, all right, let me check Altler and Altler. What do they say about sampling size? When I find out that no, based on this year of publication, they were not talking about this sample size in quantitative, then I'll make a question mark. Then I'll say to them, to the feedback which I'm supposed to submit, to say the student must really look at this aspect because this author says this and this about the sample size in regards to quantitative. All right. In other words, make sure that your facts are correct, so that whoever is going to try to verify them will find the same answers to your fact. There's no way you can say this is a reasonable sample size or this is the required one. You are the one as a writing up who's supposed to tell us. Okay? But you cannot thumb stamp this thing. Refer to a certain source. That's how we normally determine some of those aspects, especially in quantitative. Qualitative is not so much complicated, all right? But quantitative is the one which is more complicated. Because remember that other external examiners, they will say, no, You cannot sample 60 participants, all right, for this study, whereas your population is 200 learners. Can you see now? Another external examiner could query that. But if you are right in your writing, you've put your facts clearly and you've cited certain authors or sources justifying your sample size, no one is going to query that. There's a hand which is up here. Let's take the hand quickly.
Thank you, Doctor. I just wanted to ask, I'm a bit confused now. Can you tell me the difference between the purposive sampling and cluster or stratified sampling? Because in my mind, if you are purposefully selecting certain people that need to answer your interview or questionnaire, isn't that also a form of stratifying to say that I'm stratifying on these qualities? So yeah, what's the difference between the two?
I think my understanding about strata, that's why we say stratified sampling. Then you have certain strata. In other words, you group them. All right, you just group them. Okay, and when you stratify it, you make sure that there's equal representation, so that no one is left behind. Okay, let's say, for example, maybe I can use, I don't know which one I can use now. Let's say, for example, I want to get to give out a questionnaire to a certain college, all right? And in this college, I'm focusing on management. Then in this college, I'll give certain questions to the top management. I'll give it to the middle management. So that's strata, right? It's a grouping. But purposive sampling, in other words, I'm drawing my sample, taking into consideration certain characteristics. Remember that in strata, I'm not focusing on characteristics. I'm just focusing on grouping. If I look at top and middle management, they have different characteristics. I'm not focusing on that, but I'm saying all this level of management must be represented. All right, not looking at their characteristics, not looking at the knowledge and so on. Okay, but when I look at purposive sampling, I will say no. I can't just take anyone because I want equal representation. I'll take people who have a knowledge and understanding, who have a skill and experience in this type of a phenomena or in this type of a study which I'm conducting. That becomes more purposive sampling. That's why we say it's more applicable when we are doing qualitative studies. I'll give you this example.
Yeah. Okay, so in other words, you can basically use both. You can use both, because first you say I want upper and middle management. That's a strata, and then within upper and middle management, you can maybe say that you need to have a discussion with the CIO or the CFO that works with the following programs or technologies. So, or has knowledge of technologies. Would that be both?
But please, my only request is that when you do your writing up, tell us what type of sampling technique have you used. And there's no way these two could be the same. Okay? They quite differ. Look at other authors, how do they describe or describe these two types of sampling. I can put it up to this far in order to give you a better informed understanding on those. Those are the two different sampling techniques. Okay. Sometimes you may think that is almost the same, but for me they are not. Okay. All right. I think let's take the. All right. I think as Sifuji, let's look at your part quickly, then we close it up, colleagues. It says there, my research proposal has been approved. However, I have not included the research paradigm in that approved proposal. Yes, I think in this case, you are allowed, right? The only thing in regards to when you write your research report with an approved research proposal is that you are not supposed to change your focus area or things which you said you are going to do. But you can add, it's been allowed, honestly. If I've said I'm going to conduct qualitative study, and it's been approved in my research proposal and through ethical presentation and so on and all of this. I cannot come when I write my research report, now I come with quantitative methods. No, that's not allowed. But you can also describe your paradigm. And in fact, it was supposed to be there in your research proposal. And remember that most of the time, it also depends on the institution. Some of the institution, they will say, when we get students' research proposal, we are more focusing only on ethics. It's what other institutions are doing. They don't look at other things. They just look at the ethics part of it. Right? But it doesn't mean that the person who have been given your research proposal document does not read the other part. But the main focus is on ethics. But other institutions, they focus in everything, right? So they'll give comment in your document for everything. And I know that here, normally you submit that 750 words and so on. Then from there, for ethical approval, you submit a lengthy research proposal. So I think it was just an omission from your side. Please put the paradigm, the angle of your study, and I think it's better in that way. Then your supervisor will give you advice there and there, because the supervisor is still going to read your research report chapter by chapter. So the supervisor will say, no, if the supervisor feels that, no, let us not put it for now, it's fine. But at the end of the day, for me, I always like to have that, especially at PhD. But it's fine. I think I've answered your question. Okay, I don't see any question from your side. And I think for now, we've touched on many of the aspects. And in closing, colleagues, I think what we have done, we've looked at the different data sampling techniques in quantitative and qualitative. We've unpacked what the different techniques, and we worked on some examples and so on. So I think the workshop, which is coming next week, which is also important, it's about more about the writing up now. I didn't want to put it as a writing, academic writing. I just want to put it as plagiarism and paraphrasing. Basically, for me, paraphrasing is about the writing up. How do you write up? How do you conduct your writing? Because we found that most students are struggling with the writing up. Well, it could be at, especially at the 2 levels. I don't have a problem with my PhD, honestly. Most of them, I don't have a problem with their writing up. When I read their document, their research reports, or their research proposal, I don't have so much concern about their writing up, all right? Because they're already on a certain level. But from my M downwards, I've got a problem with the writing up. So we'll be talking about plagiarism, all right? Because it's one of the things we need to be aware of. And also we'll talk about paraphrasing. So we'll be looking at that next week. Thank you, guys, and thanks for coming. Hopefully we'll see you next week, and all the best. And bye from now. Thanks, Mr. Tony, and bye.
Thank you, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Kubek.
Thank you.
Bye.